Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Table. My name is Sean Silverii. I am the next generation pastor of Oregon Ministry Network.
Yeah, you
and this is...
Oh, this is Khalil. Hi. Thanks for joining us on our podcast. As we say it all the time, but this is a podcast really about just following Jesus in the midst of uncertainty. And Sean, you say something about uncertainty, don't you?
Just because there's uncertainties doesn't mean we can't be certain about some things.
And what do you mean by that?
There's certain things that we can hang our hat on. Who Jesus is, his love for us, identity formation things when it comes to the scriptures. Also when it comes to who God is. We can be certain about some things even in the midst of uncertainties.
Yeah, and we know that the world continues to shift around us, and we are just followers of Jesus, learning what it means to be a follower of Jesus in this current moment in time. And we've got a special guest with us. She is a repeat guest.
Repeat.
This is Pastor Andrea, and she is the kids pastor at Hope Church, which is where I work, so we get to work together all the time. Sean used to hang out with us, but then he decided to become the next-gen pastor.
So I guess I should, we've explained it in past podcasts, but as the next-gen pastor of the Oregon Ministry Network of the Assemblies of God, that's our church affiliation and fellowship. My role is that I get to hang out with kids pastors and youth pastors all over my state and get to love on them, train them, resource them, encourage them, and I couldn't be more thrilled about it. And I get to stay connected to my Hope Church family as well, though, so I'm grateful for that.
Absolutely. We're still family. We're still friends, and we are celebrating this season for you, Sean, as well. But this podcast, we are talking about hurriedness, busyness, and really unhurry, which is a little different. So what do we mean by this idea of unhurry, Sean?
Yeah, and we don't want to do a John Mark Comer repeat or anything. If for those of you who may not know, lead pastor or one of the lead pastors at Bridgetown Church in Portland, a very successful church, John Mark Comer does a great job. Have a lot of respect for him. Wrote a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and he stole that from and it's a good. There's a Devo on it and on the YouVersion app, a devotional. And he basically stole that from Dallas Willard, the late, great Dallas Willard, who passed away, I think, in 2008. He was the USC chair of the University of Southern California philosophy department for many, many years. Fantastic man of God. I'm a huge Trojan fan anyway, USC fan. Don't hate, don't put that in the comments or give us a 1-star because of that. But
thanks, Sean, for getting us a 1-star review.
But Dallas Willard was talking. He was a mentor, spiritual father to another pastor in the Bay Area of California, John Ortberg, and just basically talked about ruthlessly eliminating hurry from his life. And it's something that John Ortberg put in a couple of his books and it's caught like fire. And this idea that oftentimes we equate hurry with somewhat of a badge of honor, although we won't say it that way. Yeah. We'll actually say, "Oh man, I'm just really busy." Oh,
How are you doing?
I'm super busy. How you doing? Yeah. Oh, I'm busy. Well, duh. Everybody is busy. Are you hurried though? And we're just kind of thinking through this subject matter, and we had Andrea on a couple of episodes before on the art of Sabbath or Sabbathing well, and
which
we
is
figured
a great podcast. Really would encourage
fantastic.
anyone to go back and listen to that one on Sabbath.
Yeah, definitely listen to it. It was fantastic, and we know that this is kind of tied in some way to the idea of Sabbathing well, the hurried life versus the busy life, and living a life that is not necessarily hurried, or to unhurry ourselves. There's some things Mark Batterson says it a lot, probably not the first one to say it, that we need to unlearn, not just to learn things. We need to unlearn some things. And I am an advocate for unlearning this idea of hurriedness.
But it totally goes against everything that our current moment in time, especially in America, are promoting. I mean, we talk about all the time how technology is improving faster than ever before. Innovation, right? Our current cultural climate is rapidly changing. The generations are the gap between them in just perspectives and views is changing so fast.
Yeah.
And we celebrate that in many ways. Technological advancements and scientific achievement and medicine improving faster. Big thumbs up. Huge fan of that. But as everything else begins to move faster, us on an individual level actually learning to move slower is very counterintuitive.
It is super counterintuitive.
That's good.
What are your thoughts on that, Andrea, before we dive into some of the questions? I kind of got on a little bit of a rampage there, but
no, that's good.
Hear what your thoughts might be.
Yeah, I think hurry is not a word. Like if you do a word study, hurry is probably not a word that you're going to find specifically in the scriptures. Maybe it is. Somebody's going to look it up now in some obscure translation and find it.
Don't Wikipedia, please.
Leave me alone.
That's not a.
At least don't send
that's
Andrea.
not a
right. Don't send me any
that's not a good
hate mail.
resource.
But I think what we as believers have to do is, if that 21st century word is not found in there, we have to maybe find the opposite. At least that's what helps me. And so I think in thinking about hurriedness, I think I juxtapose it with the idea of rest. Rest is a good Bible word. Mm-hmm. And it's funny that you guys had invited me to come back and be a part of this podcast, because rest was actually I felt like the word that the Lord had given me for this year.
That's so great.
Mm-hmm. And I don't mean, resting and sleeping and all of that.
Sleep
like
until noon.
No, when the Lord kind of put that on my heart in January of 2020, he gave it to me, in the idea of an active rest, right? Rest is a verb. Right? It's an action word. Sure. And the definition that really stuck out to me was in the context of being rested on or resting upon something. And that's to be based on or grounded in, to depend on, to be supported by. And I think
that's so good.
When I think of the word hurry, I think of frantic action, of frenzy. And, I don't think that's quite how the Lord is asking us to live as believers.
Man, that's so crazy that
that's
you
a great
said
definition.
You said rest is an action word. That was counterintuitive. Even that rest seems inactive, yet there's an activity to it or an intentionality to it.
Yeah,
that is opposite of something maybe frenetic or chaotic.
Right.
That just jumped out to me.
Yeah, the idea of intentionality, what you just said.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's definitely a modern sense of rest is very passive.
Certainly.
When we've spoke about downtime before, that idea is very, conjures up very passive activities. Whereas I think a biblical rest, when we review what the Lord has to say about it, is not passive in the least.
Right.
I think it is, yeah.
So will we think hurriedness, would you say that to be hurried, is that passive or is that unintentional? Would hurried be synonymous with unintentionality? I'm curious about this. Here we are, raw, and we want this to be very organic, and so I'm just kind of curious to that. Would hurried necessarily be non-intentional? Was synonymous with that?
I think that's a really good point that you make. I think when we are hurried, we are submitting ourselves to kind of everything else around us. When I was thinking about today, the idea came to mind that hurry can convince us that we're the answer to every problem that comes our way. And newsflash, we're not. And God wants us to know the difference.
Yeah.
So I think hurriedness points to letting circumstances and situations and other people's priorities, when we're hurried, we're letting those things get in the driver's seat of our life.
Yeah.
And that's not, when we're hurried, I know when I'm hurried, it's because I've allowed my priorities to become what's most important. And we should have priorities. We should have things that are important. But I don't want my priorities to be number one in my life. I want Jesus's priorities
certainly
to be number one in my life.
That's a paradigm shift for a lot of us.
Yeah.
As well. I think, I guess just even processing out loud a little bit more, you're hurried because you have been unintentional with your time. Now, that doesn't always, we're not going to be 100% foolproof. There are times where I'm going to feel hurried simply because there are emergencies that take place. There are things, there's pressures, there's things that I can't control. And so I wouldn't say that it's all sin-filled or sinful or there's things, we're fallible. We're humans that are learning and growing. But if your life is one that is constantly hurried versus busy, then I would say that our life is we're not being intentional with our time. Yeah. In one sense.
Yeah.
Well, see, I even see maybe another side that I was thinking about while we were talking about. Is it possible that hurriedness is a choice for some in that by filling our calendar with things and stuff, we're able to escape some other things that we don't want to deal with.
I'm about to throw my journal.
So,
I'm about to throw my Bible.
When there are things that sometimes sitting in the quiet or having downtime can be very uncomfortable.
Certainly.
If there are circumstances or things in our life that we don't want to engage with or address, and by being hurried, in some ways we don't have to. And I know I've done this. I don't do this. I wouldn't say I intentionally do this all the time. Yeah. But I also know that there are times where I've known that the quiet is going to be an uncomfortable thing to process through. And God speaks to us in the quiet. So there might be an escaping some things, but we're also robbing ourselves of the opportunity for God to speak to us in that quiet as well.
That's really good. I think when we're hurried, we're not looking for God's activity in our life. Yeah. It makes me think of the rabbit in Alice in Wonderland, right? Here's Alice in front of him who needs his help, and he's running around. I'm late for a very important date,
it's a
right?
Great example.
Yeah. And I think that ties into this idea that when we're hurried, we miss what's important. We miss what matters most, and sometimes that is an intentional thing, because what matters most, come on, y'all, God's goal for our life is not to be comfortable. It's not to be happy. God's goal for our life is to be sanctified and to look more like Jesus. And that is uncomfortable work sometimes. So we're going to fill our time, right? I'm late for a very important date. That's mine, because Jesus, I don't know that I want to hear what you got to say.
That's true. Yeah. What are some things that we miss in the hurriedness?
Absolutely.
I would ask both of you that. What are things that you can think of that we miss?
Yeah.
I'd like to hear your thoughts first on that, Andrea.
Yeah, I think when I am hurried, the number one thing that sticks out to me, I miss loving my neighbor. Ooh, I miss it because it's what's important to me that's making me feel rushed, right? And because I'm a very human being, loving people, it costs, right? It takes something from me, right? And it should. And so when I am hurried and when I am rushed, that is the time when I am not about to hit the pause button and listen. I'm a kids pastor, so that's when I am not going to stop and listen to a kid tell me about Fortnite for the 5 millionth time, right? But listening is loving, right?
And
pausing, and it's important to them, right? So I think for me, the number one thing that goes out the window, and it goes out probably even quicker than my communing with the Lord, is loving my neighbor.
Yeah. For me, unfortunately, it's something that Jesus has been working on in me, is I get angry or defensive or frustrated. And a lot of times my kids, not necessarily my wife, which is great. And my wife she put me in a sleeper hold anyway, but a lot of times my kids experience the brunt of it. And so I tend to I lash out easily. I'm more irritable, which is weird because I'm not a very, and you two know me, I have pretty broad shoulders. I don't get stressed out a lot easily, I should say. But if I'm hurried, it doesn't matter if I'm stressed or not. I think there's a difference there. If I'm hurried, I tend to be very short. I tend to get frustrated very easily with individuals. Yeah. And the ones that I love the most tend to bear the brunt of that. And so that is that's a painful recognition that took place out of my sabbatical in 2019.
Yeah.
That I realized.
That's good, Sean. And I think oftentimes when we are hurried, we're looking for the next thing, right? Where I'm trying to check this present box to get to the next thing. So we lose the sweetness of the present.
Yeah, in the moment.
Yeah.
And that's what I was going to say on this. I mean, I resonate with what you said, Sean, but I think I miss the beauty of the moment because I'm so busy worrying about the next thing that I forget what it is to just enjoy the present moment. And that can mean missing the goodness of the friends around me, the care and the love that I have. It means missing how beautiful the green grass is in the spring and the breeze and the environment around me. You know, both of you have told me stories about just slowing down and noticing details in life, noticing things that you wouldn't have otherwise seen. And I get so, in my hurriedness, I get so caught up thinking about the next thing that I miss the present. Yeah. And that really stands out to me because in the book of John, chapter 15, Jesus says, and in verse 11, he says, I say these things so that you may have joy, so that you'd have, your joy would be complete. Yeah. And I'm reminded by that verse to remember that God wants us to have joy in our lives and joy in the present. And I think that hurriedness robs me of joy in my life. It's
good. That's
good. It's so true.
Yeah, I think I would agree.
Yeah, and I'm trying to look it up right now. Here it is. Jean-Pierre de Croissant.
Ooh, bad and bougie. Yeah. Come on.
He's a great French. I don't know if he can be considered a mystic, but he wrote a powerful book called the Sacrament of the Present Moment. Oh. And Khalil, was actually with both of you when you were talking about that, missing that present moment. So that's something that people might, if they want to jump into it, not a very hard read or a long read, but just talking about the present moment and making the moment sacred. And it comes a little bit more easily, I think, to people who would be a naturalist pathway. Gary Thomas talks about 9 spiritual pathways, and we'll at some point probably do a spiritual pathways podcast. But the naturalist is going to be the one that pauses, that really takes notice. Not the only one, but going to be one of those that does that. And Jean-Pierre talks about that. So just a plug for his book. He's dead, long gone.
So question, we can do this briefly so we can even look at what the scriptures have to say about this. But
certainly.
What would be a good self-check right now for someone listening to just say, am I hurried?
I love that. You do even on a scale.
And I know that we don't have anything written down, right? But what are, maybe even for you, what would be some of your self-check and what could someone else use for them?
It's a great question. I'm trying to think of maybe 2 or 3 different on a scale of 1 to 10s. And one of the thoughts is, do I feel like I'm constantly thinking about the next thing? Mm-hmm. That's a very personal, subjective thing to answer. Mm-hmm. On a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being, yes, I am constantly on to the next thing. So another way of asking that is, am I celebrating? That can be another thing. Am I celebrating? So if I'm not celebrating or pausing, in celebration doesn't need to be this cheering, clapping of the hands, high fives, and fist bumps. It could be a simple pause and reflection.
What are we celebrating too? Because I think maybe nothing notable has happened in the last week or two. Yeah. So what am I celebrating?
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, exactly. What am I celebrating? Am I finding something within the daily routine? So once I finish one project, a celebration can easily be, oh man, that feels good, and pausing and maybe looking over that task list maybe with all the check marks and saying, that's why a lot of times I do enjoy certain construction projects and those types of things around my house, because I can look at it and say, oh man, I finished something, and it doesn't have to be long, 5 minutes,
right?
And it's a simple prayer maybe. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts too. Both of your thoughts on this, but I think that's a really important piece. What am I celebrating?
That's good.
Yeah.
I think a good practical check is kind of looking at the fruit in your life.
Mhm.
Where's the fruit?
Yeah.
Where's your joy? Where's your peace? Where's your patience? And asking someone that is close to you, someone that even, that cohabitates with you, they're in your space, right?
Yeah.
That is, I think, key, because sometimes the way that we look at ourselves can be skewed in either direction. We're either,
certainly,
man, I'm just killing it, or like I am the worst human being alive, right?
Or both.
Yeah.
It'd
So
have to
I think, letting people into your space,
Mhm.
inviting them in, and then asking them, hey, like, lately, I know how I have been thinking, what I've been feeling a lot lately, but are you seeing X, Y, and Z in my life? And then also too, for me, something I can tell, what does my body feel like?
Oh, good.
I know where I carry stress and where I carry tension, and okay, are my shoulders tight? When I'm sitting, is my jaw clenched? Where's how's my mouth sitting? How does my back feel? Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for me, it's
think
jittery, or
if I
shaking my
can't
knee
sit
or
still,
something like that, right?
Oh yeah.
that
There
something's
might be some extra stress.
I'm
there.
either stressed or overcaffed.
Or a little
Or
bit of both.
both.
No, that's a good part to talk about, the physical pieces of that.
And
That's
I
good.
think
It's
of
important.
simply some of those self-indicators, Sean, like you said. Do I seem more irritable
right.
than I should be?
Right.
Or are little things getting to me?
Mhm.
Or maybe I'm upset at someone around me for something that is not their fault, or they don't know about, or it's just out of proportion.
Yeah.
Am I upset that my roommate didn't wash their dish, and for some reason there's an overreaction in my spirit, or I know some people get upset when people like smack while they eat. Right? I know that's kind of funny, but is there an over just frustration or irritability, or someone says something and is defensiveness kicking in quickly?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I would also say, when's the last time that I just stopped and noticed and appreciated things around me?
Yeah.
Right.
That I love your
Scale of
Alice
1
in
to 10.
Wonderland image, because with the rabbit, there's no appreciation for anything happening right now.
Right.
And in a hurried state, you can't stop to just enjoy the moment. So those are great.
And all of those things, really quick before we move on, all of those things are indicators that I need to rest.
Yeah.
And so when to take that practicality a little bit further, we need to rest in some way when those things are happening. When I'm irritable, when I feel the stress I carried in my neck, when my jaw is, I need to pause. I need to do a thing I call it stop, collaborate, and listen. I take it from obviously the great Vanilla Ice, but I need to do that.
The theologian,
The great theologian. If it's 5 minutes, if it's 50 minutes, I need to take a nap.
Yeah.
I need to go outside and play with my son, or throw the football, or like you talked about in the Sabbath podcast. I need to bake something. I need to, for my wife, it's cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like she just needs to get the bathroom cleaned or the kitchen cleaned. You know? It's a stress relief. It helps with that unhurriedness, unlearning hurriedness.
Yeah.
So
It's good. It's good.
That's great. So I'm assuming someone will listen right now, and they at some point, and I'll just say this: if you're looking for practical examples of how to rest well, the Sabbath podcast is a great one.
Point people back
Andrea
to that,
rolled out some really great examples that
Yes.
I think are beneficial to all of us. No matter your personality type, there's something there that we can probably all benefit from.
Mm-hmm.
But what we always, as followers of Jesus, we're trying to navigate this. If someone's listening right now and they say, "Yeah, I'm hurried. What does the Bible have to say for us on this? Is there any wisdom or some guidelines or some principles that we can pull out from the Scripture that can help us moving forward with this kind of busyness that is everywhere around us?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, just to maybe set up Andrea a little bit, we have to look at the life of Jesus. So Jesus is a rabbi. And sometimes we forget that. He was a Jewish rabbi in a culture in a certain specific time period. And so rabbis, especially if you were of any kind of prestige, any kind of the Levitical order, like a priest or a scribe or whatever, rabbis as well lumped into that category would never run. Men never ran.
Mm-hmm.
You notice Jesus is a very busy person.
Yeah.
Okay, when the each gospel account of his life, each gospel writer demonstrates a point in the narrative where he begins his public ministry.
Yeah.
And it is around that 3-year period that we see it. That is a little bit of time to do a lot of stuff. He is implementing and not institutionalizing, but instituting the kingdom.
Yeah.
And he is very busy, but he is never in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
That is very telling for us. And we were looking up some scriptures and stuff, just the idea found in, or the account or the example of a girl who had died. In Matthew chapter 9, verse 18 through 26 is the example where Jesus is asked by a ruler. Okay, this is somebody with power, authority, probably within the Roman government of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "My daughter has died. Come lay your hand on her and she'll live." So he has great faith. So Jesus runs? Nope. Doesn't say he runs to her. He follows this guy with his disciples. Crowds start to follow him. It gets harder and harder to get to this guy's house. And then he pauses in the middle of it because he feels like somebody just tugged. He felt some power go from him. The woman in the issue of blood touches it. It's like, yo, Jesus, let's go. He's like, nah, I'm going to chill here for a second.
So even on the way to something urgent, he's interrupted, but he pauses.
He pauses.
Yeah.
And there's that pause when it comes to Lazarus. He hears that Lazarus is dead. Or not dead, he was sick.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, if you would have gotten here earlier. No, this is so that you might see the power of God in some respects. So Jesus demonstrates for us this really awesome harmony and tension, if you will, with I have lots of things going on, but at the same time, I'm going to live out the present moment.
Good.
And I'm going to notice the birds and the trees and the way the sun sets and all of those things. But I'm probably reading into the scriptures.
In that, though, there's, they tell Jesus, you're too late, basically. Right? Man,
right.
You're too late. And
right.
I just immediately started thinking that oftentimes many of us operate with this fear of being too late or missing out or missing an opportunity. And that can drive our hurriedness.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to miss this right now. And Jesus even shows us in that he didn't have this fear of missing things. I mean, the purposes of God, we're not going to miss them by walking at a healthy pace.
Mm-hmm.
And that immediately jumped out to me. That's not the immediate meaning of that scripture, but there is still a principle that jumps out there.
Yeah, that's good. I think it points to the purpose of the pause.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Jesus is walking, and this woman who, because of her physical ailment, that passage lays out a lot of what she had been through, but also she would have been cut off from community because this issue that she was battling with made her unclean. Right? So Jesus, he's going and he's on his mission, and because he wasn't hurried, he changed this woman's life.
Yeah.
Right? 12 years she'd been cut off from community.
Yep.
She had suffered physically, emotionally, mentally. And because he wasn't in a hurry, there was some healing that happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
A life change happened. It's beautiful.
Well, this conversation has been so good that we're actually breaking it into 2 parts. So hope you've enjoyed this section. Look forward to our next episode as we dive into really the practicality of how we can implement some of the things that we are talking about and what it looks like to apply these truths in a way that really transforms our lives. Thanks for joining the podcast for this episode. And until our next one, who are you inviting to your table?